Welcome back to our channel.
Welcome. I am Lisa.
And I'm Eric. Do you want to improve your English easily? If so, you're in the right place.
So let's get started and make English learning easy. So Eric, what are the words today?
The first word today is temporary. Then we will continue with permanent and to destroy, then to leave out. And the final one is at the drop of a hat.
Okay, let's start with the first word.
Today's first word is temporary.
Temporary.
Temporary. Temporary is an adjective, and it means lasting for only a short period of time. When something is temporary, it's not going to stay forever. It's just for a short or a limited time.
Exactly. We use temporary to talk about things that are only for a short while. For example, you might have a temporary job that you do for a few weeks or months. Eric, could you give us an example sentence?
Sure. Here's the first example. She took a temporary job at the store while she looked for something else. It means that she worked at the store for a short time, but she was planning to find another job soon.
Good example, Eric. This is mine. The store is closed during the temporary repairs. This means the store will only be closed. For a short period of time during the repair, it is not completely closed.
Great example. Now, a quick note. Temporary is an adjective, and temporarily is an adverb, which is very common as well. For example, the office will be closed temporarily because of the snow.
Good note, Eric. Okay, now, let's hear a short dialogue using the word temporary.
I heard you moved to a new apartment. Are you planning to stay there for a while?
Not really. It's just a temporary place until I find something better.
Oh, I see. That makes sense. A temporary house is a good choice until you find a good place to live.
Exactly. I don't want to rush into anything too quickly.
That dialogue shows how temporary is used to describe something that is only meant to last for a short time.
Yes, and it's a very practical word that you'll hear in many different situations.
Definitely. It's used a lot when people talk about short-term plans or situations. It helps people understand that something will not continue for a long time.
And it's a very helpful word in both casual and more serious conversations when talking about things that will change soon.
Exactly. So remember, if you want to talk about something that is only for a short period, you can use the word temporary or temporarily as an adverb. Well, that's all for the word temporary. We hope you learned its meaning.
I hope so, Lisa. Shall we move on to the next word?
Yes, please, Eric.
Okay, our next word today is permanent.
Permanent.
Permanent. Permanent means something that continues for a very long time or forever. It's the opposite of temporary.
Yeah. We use permanent to describe things that are meant to continue for a long time, like a permanent job, a permanent marker, or a permanent solution. Eric, let's give some example sentences.
Sure, here's the first example. After renting for years, they finally bought a permanent home. It means that they now own a house where they can stay for as long as they want.
Here's another example. The tattoo artist warned that the design would be permanent. It means that once the tattoo is done, it will stay on the skin forever and cannot be easily removed.
By the way, a quick note, permanently it is an adverb that is very common as well. For example, smoking is likely to damage your health permanently.
Good point, Eric. Now let's listen to a short dialogue using permanent.
I'm really happy they finally offered me a permanent position in the company after working for 2 years as a temporary employee.
That's fantastic, Jack. A permanent position gives you more job security.
Exactly. I don't have to worry about looking for another job anytime soon.
In this dialogue, we can see the difference between Sarah's temporary job and her new long-term position. Eric, what would you say about the word permanent?
Like temporary, it can be used in both formal and informal situations. It's a very useful word in many contexts, and it's quite common. We use it often to talk about lasting situations or things that don't change in a short time.
Good explanation. Any tips for our listeners on how to use it, Eric?
Yes, I have. Permanent is the opposite of temporary. Use it when you want to emphasize that something will last for a very long time or forever.
Yes, and remember, making a permanent decision is often a big step. So think carefully.
Well said, Lisa.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, shall we move on to the next word?
Yes, let's do that. The next word is destroy.
Destroy.
Destroy. Destroy is a verb, and it means to completely ruin or damage something so that it no longer exists or can't be used anymore. When you destroy something, you make it unusable.
Exactly. You can use destroy to describe situations where something is severely damaged, whether it's an object, a place, or even an idea.
Thanks for your contribution, Lisa. Let's give some examples of sentences. Here's my example. The fire destroyed the old house. It means that the fire burned the house so badly that it was completely damaged and could not be used anymore.
Good example, Eric. This is mine. They had to destroy the old bridge to build a new one. It means they had to break down the old bridge completely so that they could build a new one.
Let's talk a little more about the word destroy. It's a very strong word, and it's used when something is completely ruined or wiped out.
Yes, and destroy can be used both literally and figuratively. For example, you can destroy physical objects, like buildings or cars. But you can also use it figuratively, like destroying someone's confidence, or destroying a reputation.
Let me give an example. She made one bad mistake, and it destroyed her career.
Good example, Eric. Okay, let's listen to our dialogue about to destroy.
Did you see the news? The storm destroyed several houses in the village.
Yes, it was terrible. The strong winds and heavy rain caused so much damage. The storm not only destroyed houses, but also destroyed people's hopes, future plans, and everything.
It must be so hard to lose everything like that.
Absolutely. When things are destroyed, it takes time and effort to start over.
Useful dialogue, Eric, isn't it?
Yes, Lisa.
In the dialogue, we hear destroy, which is used to describe how the storm caused severe damage to the neighborhood. It completely ruined homes and belongings.
Yes, and this shows that destroy is a very strong word. It's used when something is damaged so badly that it can't be repaired or brought back.
Eric, do you think destroy is a common word in English?
It's quite common. You'll hear it often in everyday conversation when people are talking about severe damage or something being ruined. It's also used in news reports, especially when discussing natural disasters or accidents.
Exactly. So remember, when you want to describe something being ruined completely, you can use the word destroy. Okay, I think we explained the word destroy fairly enough. Let's move on to our next word.
Our next word today is leave out.
Leave out.
Leave out.
Leave out means to not include or take out something or someone, either by accident or on purpose.
That's right. It's often used when talking about forgetting to add something or choosing not to keep it. Let's look at some examples.
Here's the first example. Don't leave out any important details when you write your report. It means that, when writing a report, you should include all the important information and not forget anything.
Here's another example. We left John out of the team photo because he was late. It means that John wasn't included in the photo because he didn't arrive on time.
Good example, Eric. Now, let's listen to a short dialogue using leave out.
Jake, I think we should leave out the complicated graphs from our presentation. They might confuse people.
I agree. Let's keep it simple and only include the most important points.
Sounds good. And now, let's make sure not to leave out any key information.
Definitely. We need to cover all the main ideas clearly.
That was a nice example, Eric. It shows how leave out is used when deciding what to include or not include in something. Now, let's talk about this phrase. What would you say about leave out, Eric?
It's more informal, Lisa. We use it in everyday conversations, but in formal writing, we might say omit instead.
That's right. And I think it's a common phrasal verb. Right, Eric?
Yes, it's quite common. We use it often when talking about keeping or taking out things. And it's useful in many situations, from cooking to writing to planning events.
I agree. Any tips for our listeners on how to use it, Eric?
Remember, leave out can be accidental or intentional. You can leave out something if you want, or you should not leave out this or that.
Great point, Eric. And remember, sometimes leaving things out can change the whole meaning. For example, in our podcasts, we try not to leave out any important details, but sometimes we leave out some unnecessary things.
Fantastic summary, Lisa. I think our listener understood leave out now better.
I think so, Eric. Okay, let's move on to the last word of today.
The last word today is at the drop of a hat.
At the drop of a hat.
At the drop of a hat. At the drop of a hat is an idiom that means to do something immediately or without thinking. When someone does something at the drop of a hat, they do it very quickly and without hesitation.
That's right, Eric. This idiom is often used to describe someone who is ready to act or make a decision very quickly. Now, let's give 2 example sentences to help everyone understand it better.
Sure, here's my example. She's always ready to help her friends at the drop of a hat. It means that she will help her friends immediately without thinking twice.
Good example, Eric. My example is, he would quit his job at the drop of a hat if he found a better opportunity. It means that he would leave his job right away without any hesitation if he got a better offer.
Now, let's give a short dialogue to show how at the drop of a hat can be used in conversation.
Did you hear about Tom? He decided to move to another city.
Wow, that was fast. He's the type to do things at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, he didn't even think twice about it. Just packed his bags and left.
That's Tom for you. Always ready to make a big change at the drop of a hat.
That was a nice example, Eric. It shows how at the drop of a hat is used to describe someone who makes quick decisions.
Yes, Lisa, it's a very colorful phrase that describes how some people act fast without delay. Now, let's talk a bit about at the drop of a hat.
Well, Eric, I think at the drop of a hat is useful because it helps us describe actions or decisions that are made immediately.
I agree. And at the drop of a hat is quite common in both everyday conversation and storytelling. It's a fun way to talk about someone who doesn't need much time to make up their mind.
Exactly, Eric. Also, it's easy to remember. Just imagine a hat dropping and someone taking it from the ground.
Good visual, Lisa. So, listeners, try using at the drop of a hat when you want to talk about someone who is ready to act or decide very quickly.
Yes, it's a fun idiom to use.
Agreed. Well, I think we have reached the end of our podcast today.
We hope you found today's words helpful.
See you in the next episode with more simple English explanations.
Bye for now. I am Lisa.
And I'm Eric. Do you want to improve your English easily? If so, you're in the right place.
So let's get started and make English learning easy. Okay, Eric, what's on our list for today?
The first word today is stingy. Then we will continue with greedy and to mock. Then to call on. And the final one is put on an act.
Okay, let's start with the first word.
The first word of today is stingy.
Stingy.
Stingy. Stingy is an adjective. It describes a person who does not like to spend money or give things to others. When someone is stingy, they are not generous, and they try to keep as much as they can for themselves.
That's right, Eric. Stingy has a negative meaning and is often used to criticize someone who is too careful with their money. Now, let's give 2 example sentences to help everyone understand better.
Sure, here's my example. Tom is so stingy. He never buys gifts for anyone. It means that Tom does not like to spend money even when it is expected, like for gifts. He tries to save his money all the time.
Good example, Eric. My example is, she was too stingy to give even a small tip at the restaurant. It means she didn't want to spend extra money, even a small amount. This shows that she is not generous.
Exactly, Lisa. Now, let's give a short dialogue to show how stingy can be used in conversation.
Have you noticed how Paul never joins us when we buy coffee?
Yes, I have. He's quite stingy. He doesn't like spending money on anything.
I know. Last time, he didn't even want to give any money for the office birthday cake.
That's too bad. So it's nice to share sometimes and not be too stingy.
That was a nice example, Eric. It shows how stingy is used to describe someone who doesn't like to share or spend money even in small amounts.
Yes, Lisa, it's a very descriptive word. What would you say about stingy?
Well, it's quite a useful word to describe someone who is very careful with their money or resources, and it's fairly common, especially when talking about money or people who don't like to give or spend money. It's important to know this word to describe certain behaviors or situations.
I agree, and it's important to remember that it has a negative meaning, so it's better not to use it directly about someone unless you know them well.
Good tip, Eric. So just remember, if you want to talk about someone who doesn't like to share or spend money, you can use the word stingy.
Exactly. Well, that's all for today's word, stingy. We hope you find it useful.
Okay, Eric, let's move on to our next.
Yes, the next word we'll explain today is greedy.
Greedy.
Greedy. Greedy is an adjective describing someone who wants more than they need, especially more money, food, or power. When people are greedy, they are not satisfied with what they have and always want more and more.
Exactly. Greedy is often used in a negative way to describe people who take more than they need or want more than is fair. Eric, could you give us an example sentence?
Of course, Lisa. Here's the first example. The greedy man took all the cookies and didn't share them with anyone. This means that the man wanted all the cookies for himself and didn't want to share them with others, which shows selfish behavior.
That's a clear example. I'll give another one. She was too greedy and asked for more money, even after she got a raise. It means that she already got more money but still wanted more, which shows she was not satisfied.
Now, let's hear a short dialogue using the word greedy.
Did you see how Tom took almost all the pizza at the party?
Yes, I did. That was so greedy of him. There wasn't much left for everyone else.
I know. I think it's important to share. And not be greedy in situations like that.
Exactly. It's always better to think of others too.
That dialogue shows how greedy is used to describe someone who takes more than their share without thinking of others.
Yes, and it's a word you'll often hear when people are discussing unfair or selfish behavior.
Eric, would you say greedy is a common word in English?
Absolutely. It's quite common and is often used when people want to talk about someone who is not generous or fair. It's often used in both formal and informal situations. It is also used to talk about people who want more and are not satisfied with what they have.
I agree. It's also important to understand social interactions and how people might understand certain actions.
Yes, so just remember, if you want to describe someone who always wants more than they need, you can use the word greedy.
Well, I think we have explained the word greedy enough, Eric. Now, let's move on to our next word.
The next word is to mock.
To mock.
To mock. To mock means to make fun of someone or something in a cruel way, often by copying them. It's about laughing at someone or imitating them. You try to show they're silly or stupid.
Good explanation, Eric. Let's look at some example sentences. Eric, can you give us the first one?
Sure. Here's the first example. The children mocked the new student's accent.
It means that the children made fun of how the new student spoke, probably by copying his accent in a bad way.
Exactly. Now, Lisa, can you give us the second example?
Of course. Here's the second example. Don't mock your sister's singing. It's not nice. It means that someone is making fun of their sister's singing, maybe by imitating it badly.
Good example, Lisa. Let's listen to a short dialogue using mock.
Why are you upset, Tom?
Some kids were mocking my new glasses, Mr. Johnson.
That's not acceptable. We don't mock others in this class.
They kept imitating me and laughing at me.
Okay, Tom. I'll talk to them.
In this dialogue, we heard mock used twice. It showed how unkind behavior can hurt someone's feelings. Now, let's talk more about this word. Eric, what would you say about to mock?
It can be used in both formal and informal situations, but the act of mocking is usually considered impolite.
Good point. Do you think it's a common word?
Yes, it's quite common. Unfortunately, people sometimes mock others, so it's important to know this word.
I agree. Why do you think it's useful to learn this word?
It helps us describe an unkind behavior. It's also good to know, so we can understand if someone tells us not to mock others.
That's true. Any tips for our listeners on how to use it, Eric?
Yes, remember, to mock is usually negative. Use it to describe or discourage unkind behavior, not to encourage it.
Great advice. Listeners, try using mock in sentences, but remember to be kind in real life.
Yes, it's a word we should know, but an action we should avoid. Be nice to others.
Let's move on to our next phrase, Eric.
The next phrase we'll explain today is call on.
Call on.
Call on. Call on is a phrasal verb with a few different meanings. The first meaning is to ask someone to do something or to answer a question, especially in a formal or educational setting. The second meaning is to visit someone, usually for a short time.
If a teacher calls on a student, it means the teacher is asking the student to speak or answer a question. And if you call on a friend, it means you visit them at their home. Let's give some examples so our listeners can understand it better.
Sure. Here's the first example. The teacher called on Emily to answer the question. This means that the teacher asked Emily to speak and answer the question.
I'll give the second example for the second meaning. On my way home, I decided to call on my grandmother to see how she was doing. It means that I visited my grandmother's house to check on her and spend a little time with her.
Great examples. Now, let's talk a bit about grammar. Call on is a separable phrasal verb when it means to ask someone to speak. For example, the teacher called Emily on. But when it means to visit someone, it is inseparable, like call on my grandmother.
Yes, and it's quite a flexible phrasal verb that can be used in both formal and informal situations, depending on the context.
Now, let's hear a short dialogue using the phrase call on in both of its meanings.
In today's class, the professor called on me to explain my answer, and I wasn't prepared.
Oh no! That must have been stressful. Next time, just be ready in case she calls on you again.
I know. By the way, I might call on you this weekend if I'm in your neighborhood. We could have some coffee.
Sure, just let me know when you're nearby.
That dialogue shows how call on can be used both to ask someone to speak and to visit someone.
Yes, and it's a very useful word for everyday conversations. And it's quite common, especially in classroom or meeting settings when people are asked to speak.
It's also used in casual conversations about visiting someone.
I agree. It's important to know both meanings because they can often be used in different contexts.
Exactly. So remember, if you want to ask someone to speak or visit someone, you can use the phrase call on for both situations.
Good summary, Lisa.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, we have reached the last word today. What is the last word, Eric?
The last word today is put on an act.
Put on an act.
Put on an act. Put on an act is an idiom. It means to behave in a not sincere way, usually to deceive or impress someone. If someone is putting on an act, they are not being honest about how they feel, who they are, or what they say.
They act in a way to trick others or make a false impression. Eric, could you give us an example sentence?
Here's the first example. He seemed nice, but he was just putting on an act to get what he wanted. It means that he was pretending to be nice, but he wasn't really sincere. He just wanted something in return.
That's a good example, Eric. I'll give another one. She put on an act of being interested in the conversation, but she was actually bored.
It means that she pretended to be interested, but in reality, she didn't care about the conversation at all.
Great examples. Now, let's hear a short dialogue using the phrase put on an act.
Why is Tom acting so polite suddenly?
Oh, he's just putting on an act because the boss is here.
Really? He seems so different.
Yeah, he always puts on an act in front of important people. It's not the real Tom.
That dialogue shows how put on an act can be used to describe someone who is pretending to be different from who they really are.
Yes, and it's a very useful idiom when you want to talk about behavior that isn't sincere or honest. Lisa, what would you say about the idiom?
It's quite common in everyday conversations, especially when people talk about someone who is trying to deceive or impress others in a fake way.
Yes, and it's mostly used in informal situations when you want to talk about someone who is not being honest or genuine. It's a strong expression, so be careful when you use it.
I agree. And it's important to remember that it has a negative meaning, so it's usually not something positive.
Exactly, Lisa. Well, I think we have reached the end of our podcast today. We hope you found today's words helpful.
See you in the next episode with more simple English explanations.
Bye for now.